Chapter 6. Tears of Regret. As Soo-ji grappled with the pain of rejection, she found solace in the sanctuary of her music. With trembling hands, she poured her heartache into every note, each melody element for the love she could never have. The moon hung low in the sky, its silver light casting long shadows across Soo-ji's dimly lit room. She sat at her piano, fingers hovering over the keys, her heart heavy with the weight of unspoken words and unfulfilled desires. The events of the past few days replayed in her mind like a haunting melody, each note a painful reminder of what could have been. She had laid her heart bare, confessing her love to the one person who had consumed her thoughts day and night. But instead of reciprocating her feelings, he had turned away, leaving her alone in a sea of rejection and heartache. Tears welled up in Soo-ji's eyes as she remembered the look of pity in his eyes, the gentle shake of his head as he uttered those crushing words. "I'm sorry, Soo-ji. I just don't feel the same way." The pain was still raw, a gaping wound in her soul that refused to heal. But amidst the darkness that threatened to consume her, there was a glimmer of light, her music. It had always been her refuge, a place where she could escape the harsh realities of life and lose herself in the beauty of sound. With a deep breath, Soo-ji let her fingers fall onto the keys, the familiar touch sending shivers down her spine. She closed her eyes and let the music take over, allowing her emotions to flow freely through every chord and every melody. The piano became an extension of her being, a vessel through which she could express the depths of her sorrow and longing. Each note was a brushstroke on the canvas of her pain, painting a picture of heartbreak and regret. The music swelled and ebbed like the tide, carrying Soo-ji on a journey through the stormy seas of her emotions. She poured her heartache into every key, every crescendo a cry of anguish, every decrescendo a whisper of despair. Time lost all meaning as Soo-ji lost herself in her music, her tears mingling with the notes that filled the room. She played until her fingers itched and her voice grew hoarse, until every ounce of emotion had been wrung from her soul and laid bare for the world to see. And when the final chord faded into silence, Soo-ji was left spent and exhausted, but strangely at peace. For in that moment of vulnerability and rawness, she'd found a kind of catharsis, a release from the shackles of regret and the burden of unrequited love. As the first light of dawn filtered through the curtains, Soo-ji rose from the piano bench, her heart a little lighter than before. The road ahead would be long and uncertain, but she knew that as long as she had her music, she would always find the strength to carry on. With a weary smile, Soo-ji wiped away her tears and embraced the new day, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. And though the scars of her heartache would always remain, she took solace in the knowledge that through her tears of regret, she had found a way to heal. Chapter 7. A glimmer of hope. Just when all seemed lost, a glimmer of hope appeared on the horizon in the form of a kindred spirit named Min-jun. With his gentle words and compassionate heart, he offered Soo-ji a lifeline in her darkest hour, promising to help her mend the shattered pieces of her soul. The days stretched on like an endless expanse of emptiness for Soo-ji, each moment weighed down by the burden of her unrequited love. The rejection still echoed in her mind, a relentless reminder of her own vulnerability and the fragility of her heart. But just when she thought she couldn't bear the pain any longer, a glimmer of hope appeared on the horizon, shining like a beacon in the darkness. His name was Min-jun, and from the moment their paths crossed, Soo-ji felt a strange sense of familiarity, as if they were two souls destined to find solace in each other's company. He was unlike anyone she had ever met, kind-hearted, compassionate, with a gentle spirit that seemed to soothe the ache in her soul. Their first encounter was fleeting, a chance meeting in a crowded cafe on a rainy afternoon. Soo-ji had been lost in her own thoughts, her gaze fixed on the rain-soaked streets outside, when a voice broke through the silence like a ray of sunshine on a cloudy day. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" Min-jun's voice was soft and warm, a welcome respite from the cold loneliness that had settled in Soo-ji's heart. She looked up to find him standing before her, an umbrella in one hand and a gentle smile playing on his lips. Soo-ji hesitated for a moment, her heart fluttering in her chest as she took in his kind eyes and the sincerity in his voice. Without a word, she gestured for him to take a seat, and before long, they were engaged in a conversation that flowed effortlessly between them. As they talked, Soo-ji found herself opening up to Min-jun in a way she had never done with anyone before. She shared her hopes and dreams, her fears and insecurities, laying bare the depths of her soul without reservation. And to her surprise, Min-jun listened with rapt attention, his words a balm to her wounded spirit. In Min-jun, Soo-ji found a kindred spirit, someone who understood the pain of rejection and the longing for love that burned within her. He spoke of his own struggles, his own heart aches, and in those shared moments of vulnerability, a bond formed between them that felt both familiar and profound. As the days turned into weeks, Min-jun became a constant presence in Soo-ji's life, a source of comfort and support when she needed it most. He was there to dry her tears when the pain became too much to bear, to lift her spirits when she felt lost and alone, to remind her that she was worthy of love and happiness, even in her darkest hour. With Min-jun by her side, Soo-ji began to see the world through new eyes. Eyes that were no longer clouded by regret and despair, but filled with hope and possibility. He helped her find the courage to pick up the pieces of her shattered heart and start anew to believe in the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, Soo-ji took comfort in the knowledge that she was not alone, that as long as she had Min-jun by her side, she could face whatever challenges lay ahead with strength and resilience. In Min-jun, she had found not just a friend, but a kindred spirit, a soulmate whose presence in her life was like a ray of sunshine on a cloudy day, a beacon of hope in her darkest hour. And as they walked hand in hand into the future, Soo-ji knew that with him by her side, anything was possible. Chapter 8. A Fragile Alliance. As Soo-ji and Min-jun grew closer, their bond blossomed like a fragile flower amidst the ruins of her broken heart. Yet beneath the surface of their burgeoning friendship, a storm brewed, a tempest of emotions that threatened to tear them apart. In the wake of her heartbreak, Soo-ji found solace in the presence of Min-jun, a beacon of light in her darkest hour. With each passing day, their friendship deepened, blossoming like a fragile flower amidst the ruins of her shattered dreams. They laughed together, cried together, shared their hopes and fears, forming a bond that felt both precious and precarious. But beneath the surface of their burgeoning friendship, a storm brewed, a tempest of emotions that threatened to tear them apart. For as much as Soo-ji tried to bury her feelings for Min-jun beneath a facade of platonic affection, she couldn't deny the truth that lingered in the depths of her heart. She was falling for him, falling harder and faster than she ever thought possible. Every smile, every touch, every whispered word sent shivers down her spine, igniting a fire within her that she could no longer ignore. And though she knew the dangers of crossing that forbidden line, she found herself drawn to him like a moth to a flame, unable to resist the pull of her own desires. Min-jun, too, seemed to be caught in the throes of their shared attraction, his eyes lingering a little too long, his touch a little too lingering. But he was hesitant, cautious, as if he feared the consequences of giving in to the undeniable chemistry that simmered between them. Their friendship became a delicate dance, a balancing act between desire and restraint, passion and reason. They tiptoed around each other, careful not to disturb the fragile equilibrium they had worked so hard to maintain. But with each passing day, the tension between them grew, until it became impossible to ignore the elephant in the room. It all came to a head one fateful night, as they sat together under the stars, the air heavy with unspoken words and unfulfilled longing. Soo-ji could feel the electricity crackling between them, a palpable tension that threatened to consume them both. Min-jun, she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend that I don't feel what I feel. Min-jun turned to her, his eyes searching hers for answers. Soo-ji, He trailed off, his words lost in the silence that stretched between them like a chasm. And then, in a moment of reckless abandon, Soo-ji closed the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that ignited a firestorm of emotions within her. For a fleeting moment, time stood still as they lost themselves in the heat of their passion, their hearts beating as one. But as quickly as it had begun, the moment was over, leaving Soo-ji and Min-jun staring at each other in shock and confusion. The fragile alliance they had forged threatened to crumble beneath the weight of their own desires, leaving them both vulnerable and exposed. "I'm sorry," Soo-ji whispered, her voice barely audible above the pounding of her heart. "I shouldn't have done that." Min-jun shook his head, his expression unreadable. "No, Soo-ji. I wanted. I just..." Their words hung in the air, a silent plea for understanding, for forgiveness, for a chance to make things right. But as the night stretched on and the stars began to fade into the dawn, Soo-ji and Min-jun were left grappling with the consequences of their actions, uncertain of where their fragile alliance would lead them next. Chapter 9. The Temptation of Forbidden Love. Caught in the throes of passion, Soo-ji found herself drawn to Min-jun in ways she could not comprehend. His touch ignited a fire within her soul, consuming her with a hunger she could not deny, even as guilt gnawed at the edges of her conscience. The kiss had unlocked something primal within Soo-ji, a desire so intense it threatened to consume her whole. As she lay awake in the darkness of her room, her mind replayed the events of that fateful night over and over again, each memory like a dagger to her fragile heart. She had always known that her feelings for Min-jun ran deeper than mere friendship, but she had never dared to acknowledge the truth that lay beneath the surface of their platonic bond. Now, with the taste of his lips still lingering on hers, she could no longer deny the fire that burned within her, a fire fueled by passion, longing, and the forbidden allure of a love she knew she could never have. Caught in the throes of her own desire, Soo-ji found herself drawn to Min-jun in ways she could not comprehend. His touch ignited a fire within her soul, sending sparks flying through her veins and setting her heart ablaze with a hunger she could not deny. Every glance, every word, every fleeting touch sent shivers down her spine, awakening a desire so intense it threatened to consume her whole. But amidst the heady rush of her newfound passion, guilt gnawed at the edges of Soo-ji's conscience, a constant reminder of the consequences of their forbidden love. She knew that what she felt for Min-jun was wrong, a betrayal of trust and a violation of the boundaries they had worked so hard to establish. And yet she found herself powerless to resist the pull of her own desires, a slave to the intoxicating allure of his presence. In the light of day, Soo-ji tried to push aside her feelings, to bury them beneath a facade of normalcy and pretend that everything was as it had always been. But the memory of their kiss lingered in the air like a ghost, haunting her every waking moment and casting a shadow over their fragile alliance. Min-jun, too, seemed to be struggling with the aftermath of their impulsive actions, his demeanor distant and withdrawn as he grappled with the weight of their shared guilt. Their once easy camaraderie had been replaced by a palpable tension, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken desires that simmered beneath the surface of their friendship. And yet, despite the turmoil that raged within her, Soo-ji found herself drawn to Min-jun like a moth to a flame, unable to resist the magnetic pull of his presence. She longed to lose herself in his arms, to drown in the depths of his gaze and forget the world outside. But as much as she yearned for him, Soo-ji knew that their love could never be, that the consequences of giving in to their forbidden desires would be too great to bear. And so she pushed aside her feelings, burying them deep within her heart where they could do no harm, and prayed that one day, the ache of longing would fade and she could find peace once more. Chapter 10. A Heart Divided. As Soo-ji's feelings for Min-jun grew stronger, she found herself torn between loyalty to her unrequited love for John Hyun and the forbidden desires that burned within her heart. With each passing day, the lines between right and wrong blurred, until she could no longer distinguish between the two. The days stretched on like an eternity for Soo-ji, each moment weighed down by the burden of her conflicted heart. Caught between the love she had harbored for John Hyun and the forbidden desires that consumed her in Min-jun's presence, she felt like a ship adrift in a stormy sea, tossed about by the tumultuous waves of her own emotions. With each passing day, her feelings for Min-jun grew stronger, like a vine slowly wrapping itself around her heart and squeezing until she could hardly breathe. His presence haunted her every waking moment, his laughter echoing in her ears like a siren's song, luring her ever closer to the edge of temptation. And yet, even as she found herself drawn inexorably towards him, Soo-ji could not shake the memory of John Hyun's rejection, the pain of his words still fresh in her mind. She had loved him with a fierceness that knew no bounds, pouring her heart and soul into a love that was never meant to be. And though she knew that her feelings for him were futile, A part of her still clung to the hope that someday he would see her for who she truly was and love her in return. But as the days turned into weeks, that hope began to fade, overshadowed by the undeniable chemistry that simmered between her and Minjun. He was unlike anyone she had ever met, kind-hearted, compassionate, with a gentle spirit that seemed to soothe the ache in her soul. And though she tried to resist the pull of her own desires, she found herself powerless to resist the magnetic pull of his presence. Caught in the throes of her own conflicting emotions, Soo-ji felt like a heart divided, torn between loyalty to her unrequited love for John Hyun and the forbidden desires that burned within her heart. She knew that what she felt for Minjun was wrong, a betrayal of trust and a violation of the boundaries they had worked so hard to establish. And yet, she could not deny the fire that burned within her, the hunger that gnawed at her insides and threatened to consume her whole. With each passing day, the lines between right and wrong blurred, until Soo-ji could no longer distinguish between the two. She longed to lose herself in Minjun's arms, to drown in the depths of his gaze and forget the world outside. But she also knew that giving in to her desires would come at a cost she was not sure she was willing to pay. And so, Soo-ji found herself trapped in a seemingly endless cycle of longing and guilt, her heart torn between two loves that could never be reconciled. As the weight of her conflicting emotions threatened to crush her spirit, she could only pray for the strength to weather the storm and emerge whole on the other side.